Leadership transitions in the church can be tricky. Sometimes they go really smooth, other times they're incredibly messy. And a lot of times they just leave people asking, what in the world just happened? And today we're going to look at one of those what in the world just happened stories. It's the story of Pastor Chris Hodges, the founder of Church of the Highlands, one of the largest churches in the country, announced just recently that he's stepping down as lead pastor. It took a lot of people by surprise. But the real question here I want to talk about today here on the Healthy Church Staff Podcast is what can we learn from this? So whether you're a pastor or a church leader or just somebody passionate about ministry, we're going to talk about 5 key lessons today about this transition that could shape how you lead. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Todd Rhodes. I'm one of the co-founders over at chemistrystaffing.com, and this is the Healthy Church Staff Podcast. All right, let's get started. We don't have all the decisions, all the details about this decision at Church of the Highlands and Chris Hodges' decisions. There's all kinds of speculation on the interwebs, and you can watch all that if you want to. I don't want to get into, was there something deeper? Was there something different behind this? There absolutely could be factors behind the scenes that we're just not privy to. But regardless of where you stand on why you think this happened, there's some valuable lessons that I think we as pastors and church leaders can really glean from this. So I've identified 5 key takeaways that I want to talk about today that I think, as you look at this story, some things that we can really learn. And the first one is just, it's the vital role of succession planning, okay? Transitions in leadership are inevitable. You will not pastor where you are. You will not be a church staff member where you are forever, right? You started sometime. There was probably somebody before you. There will probably be somebody after you. And what Chris Hodges highlighted in his announcement was the importance of younger leadership. He said the church does need to be led by a younger generation. And by proactively planning for succession, which it sounds like Pastor Chris did here in this instance, we do ensure that our church's mission continues seamlessly even as we get older or even as the leadership evolves. So that's number one. Point number one is succession planning, absolutely vital. We do a lot of that in our work at Chemistry Staffing, of working with churches and senior pastors as they work on that succession plan. Succession plan, absolutely vital. So that's number one. Number 2 is empowering emerging leaders. And Chris Hodges said, I've always felt led to empower other leaders. And whether you like Pastor Chris Hodges or you don't, you can say that the ministry at Highlands has been about identifying leaders, emerging leaders, and building into them. Even his announcement kind of underscores the importance of this mentorship. By investing in the next generation, we don't only strengthen our church's foundation currently, but we extend its impact far into the future and far beyond how long we're going to be there. So we need to constantly be developing our bench. We need to constantly be identifying young leaders and building into them, investing into that next generation. Number 3 is transparent communication. Clear and open communication during leadership changes fosters trust within the congregation. Now, I know some people are going to say, I don't know how transparent this really was. That's fine. Throw that aside if you don't think it was transparent. What I'm saying is that when, as part of your succession or when there's a leadership change, transparent communication is vitally important. Sharing the reasons behind transitions and outlining the future direction is going to help manage expectation, and it's going to create and maintain unity as well. All right, let's keep moving. Number 4, recognizing personal callings. Each of us has a unique calling. Now, what Chris Hodges says is that he's recognized that God has called him to do something different during this next phase of his life. According to Chris, he says, I'm not retiring, I'm not burned out, I'm not tired. He's just going to go and do something else. At least publicly, his decision was more about aligning closely with his passion for empowering leaders. And as you think about what God has next for you and when it's time for you to transition, that's something that you need to do. Is you have to recognize what God is calling you to do now and what God is calling you to do in the future. So this is it serves to me as a reminder to really stay attuned to where God's leading you personally. And sometimes that means significant changes, even if we're not sure why. Sometimes God just calls us to make a change, and he's calling us to a different role in a different season. All right, and then finally, keeping the mission central. During any transition, the church's mission has to remain the number one thing. And Pastor Chris reassured his congregation the best is yet to come. And by keeping our focus on the mission, we can navigate changes with hope and purpose, and we can really ensure that our churches remain steadfast and looking forward. As we wrap up here today, as you look at this story of the transition there at Church of the Highlands, we might have questions. We might not know all the details behind Chris Hodges' decision, and I'm okay with that. But these 5 lessons really highlight the importance of intentional leadership, number 1, and planning for our ministries. And if you can embrace some of these principles, it's not too early to be thinking about your succession plan. Now, I think the big surprise here, and I don't know that this is something the big surprise is that it was a surprise, right? I think, and again, I'm looking at this from an outsider, I think probably if you went to Church of the Highlands, you probably knew that Pastor Chris was building into a lot of leaders, but probably specifically the one, I forget his name, that's taking over the senior pastor role. So I don't think that was surprising, because that was in the DNA of the church and in the DNA of Pastor Chris. I think what was surprising was just getting up on a Sunday morning and laying hands and saying, essentially, I'm out. I'm going to go do something else. Here's your new senior pastor. Is that the way to do it? I don't know, but I think there was a lot more behind the scenes, maybe good, maybe bad, but a lot more behind the scenes for years that was preparing for this moment. It just took everybody by surprise when it actually happened. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You can leave a comment wherever you're listening or watching. You can send me an email anytime, podcast@chemistrystaffing.com. podcast@chemistrystaffing.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if there's any way that I can help you or your church, maybe you're a pastor and you're thinking, okay, is it time to really start to get serious about some kind of a succession plan? And my answer for that is, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just saying, yes, it is. The best time to plan your succession, to start planning your succession, was yesterday. The second best day is today. Okay, so if there's any way that I can help you and come alongside of you with helping your church, it's vitally important to have a succession plan. Even if you're 5 or 10 years out, to start on that plan now. It's better to start early. So if there's any way I can help you, you can reach out to me, podcast@chemistrystaffing.com. If your church is looking for any kind of staff or any kind of resources for healthy staff, you can head over to chemistrystaffing.com as well, or just email it, podcast@chemistrystaffing. Thanks so much, and hope you'll join me again right here on the Healthy Church Staff Podcast.